Ambassador Robert Joseph is a senior scholar at the National Institute for Public Policy. Prior to 2007, he served as United States Special Envoy for Nuclear Non-Proliferation. He was also Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security and served in the National Security Council as Special Assistant to the President. Hi, it's Tim Constantine from the Capitol Hill Show. My guest today, Ambassador Robert Joseph. Bob, how are you?
Just great, thank you, and I appreciate the invitation to join you today.
Thank you for doing this with us. You know, when we look at the president and he's doing his trip around the Middle East, the United States has just concluded its fourth set of meetings with Iran in Oman. And the benchmark was set early by Steve Witkoff and by Trump's team, right, that there would be no uranium enrichment. There were other things in there as well. How likely is it that through discussion, through diplomacy, we can actually achieve that particular line?
Well, first, on the president's trip, I think it's really quite a remarkable journey. I think he's made a great deal of progress in resetting our relationship with a critical region of the world. The top lines of technology, not terrorism, and commerce, not chaos, I think strike exactly the right tone. And in the context of his speech yesterday in Riyadh, he gave Iran yet another very stern warning. And I think the president has made clear that he will accept nothing other than total dismantlement, which means zero enrichment. Now, there have been, as you point out, 4 rounds of talks. After the last talk, the Iranian officials talked about the U.S. demand for zero enrichment, describing it as unrealistic and, in fact, describing it as irrational. So my sense is that the odds are very small that we will have an agreement that actually ensures no enrichment. That said, I think the president has made a very important move in making clear to the Iranians and to the world that his preference is a negotiated outcome. But Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, and if Iran insists on enrichment, which is a path to nuclear weapon, I think that other options will have to be exercised. And I think it's very clear, again, from remarks yesterday by the president, that the next step is going to be maximum pressure on the regime.
Culturally, saving face is very important in that part of the world, making sure that you are seen as having some sort of victory. There's some version of that in every culture, but that is absolutely essential in these diplomatic discussions. When we see the two sides at the very beginning were debating over whether they were having direct talks or indirect talks. This was a big deal. Who was right? Are these actual direct talks or indirect talks? How about we just talk? So the fact we've had 4 meetings is great, but I think the viability question is the most important one, and I think you've answered that. But when we see, even here at home, we see Senator Cruz, Senator Cotton, other high-profile people, Secretary of State Rubio saying, there's really no margin here on the nuclear question. There should be a dismantling of any existing nuclear program. Is that a viable issue, or are we just saying from the get-go there's going to be trouble?
Well, I think it's important to look back at the record or the history of negotiations. I mean, we've been in negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program for over 20 years, starting with the EU3 and then moving to the EU3+1 and then the P5+1 up till present day, in which we have bilateral negotiations, both indirect and direct. I think that it's clear that the Iranians have used negotiations as a cover for other activities, and they've used it as a means to expand their program. And the senators and others that you mentioned understand this, and they understand that the negotiating game that Iran has played has led to a program that is a virtual nuclear weapon state program. I think it's very clear that Iran could continue to enrich its 60% LEU or HEU to weapons grade in a matter of days. And I think that the Iranians have, over the course of at least 20 years, made enormous progress on the weaponization front, which is less known and more covert. But even last week, another facility was revealed by the NCRI.
That was my next question. Is that facility just east of Tehran? And I was going to ask, what's the significance of that? That's, to me, that seems big. I have not seen a whole lot covered in the news or mentioned, and maybe it was because the trip was coming up, but mentioned from the administration. But to me, that seems significant. Is it, and why?
Well, I think it's significant in a technical sense because according to the information that was released, the facility is designed to extract or produce tritium being used to boost the yield of a warhead, or as a first step toward a hydrogen bomb. So it's very clear, I think, that the Iranians have continued to move forward, despite what they say about never wanting to have a nuclear weapon. They are clearly working on it. And as we read this back here, it reinforces the view that you cannot trust the mullahs, the Iranian regime in any way. And that also argues for one and only one solution, and that is no enrichment. Because if you allow any enrichment, let's say at 3.67 or at any level, they're able, as they've demonstrated in the past, to ramp that up and to race toward a nuclear weapon.
Let's talk about that, because up until, maybe 2013 or so, the line from the United States had always been nuclear-free Iran. The line was zero. And when the Obama administration began working on their agreement with Iran, that changed, and it became energy-grade nuclear development. And so what happened in there? Why did that transition occur? Why did the United States ever go to a point where it wasn't still zero?
Well, my views and the position that I took when I was in government was that it had to be zero enrichment, no enrichment. Because if you allow enrichment, you're allowing Iran to have the capacity to develop the fissile nuclear material for a weapon. What happened with the Obama administration? Well, I think in a word, it was appeasement. The Obama administration wanted an agreement very badly, and they got a very bad agreement out of the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement from 2015.
You know, we talk about appeasement, and that clearly did not work. We talk about tightening the screws, and yet Iran has continued to go on and try to further develop despite the tighter grab around the throat, if you will. So what's the ultimate solution? I mean, if the answer is nuclear-free Iran, how do we get there?
Well, I think there's only one real way to get there, and that is to have an end to this regime, not brought about by the United States, not brought about by boots on the ground from us or even money. But I think supporting the opposition within Iran is the key. To recognize the right of the opposition for self-determination and to acquire just the basic human rights that we take for granted in our own country. This is a brutal regime, but it's also a very desperate regime. It's a very weak regime. I mean, just look at what's happened in the region to their strategy, their regional strategy. They've lost their proxies in Hamas. Hezbollah has been weakened greatly. Assad's Syria has fallen. There's every aspect of their external policy has, from their perspective, gone wrong. Internally, they've never been weaker either. Internally, and you can judge that, I think, by the level of repression, even the level of executions. I mean, this is a, as I said, a very repressive, a very brutal regime that uses executions as a means to intimidate and control their own people. Their own people being the first and foremost victims of the regime, a regime that, as the president called out just yesterday, has bankrupted their country economically, that has inflicted on the people the loss of their national treasure and the loss of their basic rights, their right to freedom, their right to democracy, and all of, as I said, all of the other rights that we take for granted in our country.
We've had two strategies out of the United States, one kind of being appeasement, the other being maximum pressure, as they call it. And so is there a blind spot? Are we missing something when you say we need to encourage those who are looking for change from within? Has the United States had a blind spot in thinking, okay, maybe something either instead of or in addition to one of those two choices? Are there other choices?
I think it's worse than a blind spot, actually. I think that at times administrations have, because of their desire for an agreement, because of this illusion that seems to have prevailed, particularly in the Obama and Biden administrations, that they will be able to find moderates that they can work with in the context of the regime. Maximum pressure, though, I think is a very important tool because, as I said, this regime has never been so desperate. It's never been so weak. And if we can cut off oil sales, for example, if we can cut off the resources that they have used in the past to sponsor terrorism throughout the region, and in fact, throughout the world, and we can talk about that if you like, we can, I think, we can weaken the regime to a point where the opposition, the internal opposition, those who support democracy and freedom in Iran can prevail.
Really basic question is, how strong do we know? Not what we hope or what we speculate, but how strong do we know that the opposition is within Iran?
Well, we know that the opposition exists. We know that the opposition has demonstrated through various protests, through demonstrations across Iran, in every major city of Iran, at various times. There have been 3 major uprisings that the regime has brutally put down, killing literally hundreds and thousands of their own citizens. It's hard to judge and to say, well, how many forces does the opposition have on the ground? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there's an organized opposition, that it is supported by many in Iran, and that it leads, I think, through the resistance units that have been formed. It leads in the demonstrations and the protests, and I think ultimately in the teardown of this religious dictatorship.
When we talk about inside Iran, that's one thing. Some of these organizations have groups around the world as well. NCRI has a lot of activity in Europe, has some activity in the United States. Reza, the son of the Shah, has tried to put together some demonstrations recently. Is there one group, there may be others in addition to the two I mentioned, but is there one group that is more viable than any other? Is there one group that is a return to the Shah a viable option, knowing that history?
Well, let me just answer that based on my experience. In 2018, I attended a conference outside of Paris that was sponsored by NCRI. Mrs. Rajavi spoke there. There were 100,000 people there. When you look at those events that are sponsored by the Shah, you have a couple dozen. And they're probably paid, in my view, but maybe not. But maybe I don't have anything to support that, but that's just my instincts talking. And at most, you have a couple hundred. So, I know that here in the United States in particular, and it's much more so than the case in Europe, but in the United States, there's this sense within the academic community, within the think tank community, that the NCRI doesn't have any support. Well, that's not the feeling in Europe when you see 100,000 people. It's not consistent with the actions of the regime, which has been at war with the MEK for the last 45 years, including acts against humanity, crimes against humanity, including what the UN has called genocide. Tens of thousands of MEK, NCRI supporters have been butchered by this regime, and it is still public enemy number one within Iran in the eyes of the Ayatollah. That speaks well for the organization and the organized resistance, it seems to me.
Final question, and that is, we talk in terms of the regime. We talk in terms of regime change. We talk as potential suitors to run the country, NCRI and Rajavi and the entire organization. But let's talk about day 2, day 300, day 600, if that were to occur. And I think back just 20 years, a little more than 20 years, when Iraq had regime change, when Saddam was ousted, but there was chaos. There was no obvious leader, and even when the United States encouraged certain leadership, it didn't bode well. It's taken a long time to get where they are now, and they're in a much better position than they were 20 years ago, but 20 years is a long time. What's a realistic expectation if you have a regime change in Iran that a year after or 2 years after, what could the people of Iran expect to see?
Well, let me first say that revolutions are messy things. So there's nothing for certain, okay? But Iran is not Libya. Iran is not Iraq. I'm not talking about nation building. I mean, Iran has been a nation for 5,000 years, okay? So this is different. In terms of the transition, well, the NCRI has a 10-point plan. Mrs. Rajavi has articulated these 10 points. Those include democracy. They include respect for human rights. They include non-nuclear. They include secularism. They include equality of the sexes. It's hard not to support, a position such as taken in the 10-point plan. So you've got that. You've also got, in terms of their organized capability on the ground. And I think the idea there would be for a transition, perhaps 6 months, that would allow for the writing of a constitution and the democratic process with democratic elections following that. And I think Iran, I mean, we're talking about a real country here. We're talking about a country that has millions of very well-educated individuals, really across the political spectrum. I mean, this is a country that I think has the potential for being a very vibrant democracy. If they can, shed the chains of the current mullah's dictatorship, and quite frankly, in my view, and get away from the legacy of the Shah as well, which was also a very brutal regime that imprisoned and executed their opposition, and was subject to horrific, really, corruption.
Ambassador, thank you very much. It's been a
Okay.
pleasure.
Thank you.